there's a lot of topics that need to be discussed here. I want to start with the term there in Isaiah 45 or 45:18. I think this is really important, and I'm going to bring it up on my screen here so that everybody can see that. I want us to go through this together, because this passage has all three verbs that are used in relation to creation. Doug, could you mute your microphone, buddy? Thanks.
Sure.
So what we have here is we have the word boré. For thus says the Lord who created, boré. This is the word to create. It's the word bara. It's the same word. This is actually the participle form of it. And it can also mean the one who is the creator. It's another way you could translate that, or either way, the creator of the heavens or the one who created is really not the correct grammatical form that's being used in the New King James, but we'll let that slide. And it says who formed, the word yatsa. We see that also in Genesis chapter 1. The earth, and he made it. So here you're making this argument about the difference between the terms bara and asa. Bara means the initiation of something new. That's really the force of it. This idea that it's the creation ex nihilo, though it's possible, it's not clearly, it's not technically what it actually means, because David uses the same word, create in me a clean heart. Right? So he's talking about something, the initiation of something new. And it's this idea of newness can only be used of God. This is a word that is only used where God is the subject. Man is never said to bara something or to boré something. It's always God who can use this verb. Man never uses this verb. But God does use the word asa. And here we see it laid out very clearly. So here we have these words that who created the heavens, who he created those, and who formed the earth and made it. So notice here we have the word ose, or the word asa. So he makes the earth, but then look, he says, who did not create it in vain. And this is the bracha is actually talking about the earth, because the word earth in Hebrew is feminine, and here we have the objective suffix that's being used here. The he tells us that the thing that he didn't create in vain is talking about the earth. So he made it, and he created it, and he formed it. They're all talking about the earth here, because we see that it's got this feminine singular objective suffix that's being brought up here. So he creates the heavens, and then he says that he formed the earth, he made it, osa. So this is ose. It's actually the word osa, and it's talking about he made it. He made the earth. So he made it, he formed it, he created it, and then again he formed it. So each of these is talking about what happened in the earth. So to say that first he created it like a gazillion years ago or whatever, and then he later remade it because of the word asa, just doesn't hold any water. This verse actually does just the opposite of what you'd like it to do. This verse proves that God did all three actions at the same time. He did all three at the same time. And what's even more is that we have bara and asa. And notice in Exodus 20:11, God says, "For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them." It doesn't say 6 days plus, a billion years where Satan was on ice for a while. It just doesn't say that. So these arguments that are being used are really fallacious. I've heard these arguments. They don't stack up in the Hebrew. They don't make the sense that you'd like them to make. And unfortunately, we can't. I mean, they're just not there. So a few other things here. Whether or not the King James 11 guys had a young Earth creation bias, well, can you think of any ancient source that believed in the ruin restoration theory? I can't think of anybody. There's nobody that held to that. In fact,
actually, I have one quote that did, but go ahead. Go ahead and finish your point, though.
I mean, if you look at the ancient sources, I'm not talking a recent source, but if you look at the ancient sources, every one of them, with maybe the exception of Origen, but everybody else, we're talking pre-Ante-Nicene church fathers, and of course the Jews, they all believed that God did it in 6 literal days. There's no getting around that. They all believed it was done in 6 literal days, and that it wasn't done over millions or billions, or that God somehow destroyed and then he recreated. So that doesn't work either.
Just to clarify,
go for it.
I do agree that God created 6 24-hour periods. However, it gets into looking at each of the items and would suggest that the item that made is perhaps more appropriate, except in the context of the creation of animals, creation of human beings. Many of the creation features appear to be made as in terms of appointed their role in the creation.
Well, what would you do with Exodus 20:11 and 31, where it says that in 6 days God made everything?
Yeah, well, I think that the sources that I have read believe once again that the distinction has to be drawn between the issue of creating to begin with versus appointing each of the items to a specific role in the recreation of the heaven and the earth.
What do you do with the biblical source, though? For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rest on the 7th.
Well, I think to answer it, I have to probably go look at each of the points.
This is the point. This is the point. God says that He made it. He made everything, the heavens and the earth. That's what we have in Genesis 1:1, right? God made the heavens and the earth. So here, where it says that God made the heavens and the earth and everything, and He says this twice.
I will grant you that verse, taken by itself, tends to convey that. That is my sense. It does tend to convey that.
So why would you read it differently?
Because it's not the only verse in the Bible.
Well, which other verses are there?
Well, there's the verses we've just discussed. There'll be verses in the New Testament we'll talk about a bit later.
Okay. Well,
Scripture interprets Scripture. You agree because you're a Reformation.
Absolutely.
You're a Reformation theologian as I. So we understand all of the Scripture, or a particular Scripture in light of all of the Scripture.
Right. I wouldn't call myself a Reformationist, but that's another issue. It's okay. I'll let it go. I won't make an issue.
I won't call you a Reformed theologian.
Okay. Thank you. That's fine. Well, the other thing is the word became. Became versus was. The word haya, the basic meaning is was. That's the basic meaning. Can it be used transitively to mean became? Well, yes, it can. There are definitely times, but you could equally translate those places as was, even to say that Adam was a living being. Okay. Now, in English, because we have 2 different words to choose from, we have to make this decision. We have to make this judgment call. But Hebrew doesn't think that way. Hebrew is not all concerned about, well, is it was or became? When I was studying Hebrew, I kept thinking, where's the word for became? And it isn't there. It doesn't exist because they're not thinking in those terms. It's context, but
sure.
but they're not even.
Well, as I mentioned to you, there are 134 places in the King James in which the word hayah is translated became, and specifically, if we use the example of Lot's wife, who became a pillar of salt. Obviously, she wasn't, and then she was. So she became. And so the point is that it can be translated became, and again, it requires context.
Right, but you're basing most of your argument on a very, very subtle and subjective difference. So in all those places that you're talking about, you could also substitute the word was, and it could work. For example,
you know Hebrew better than I, but my sense is the example I've just given you, it would not convey the meaning with the same precision as the word as using the word became.
Just to let you guys know, you have 5 minutes left for this section.
Let me just make one comment. We might agree or disagree on that. Let me make one comment because I thought it was interesting. Where you said that there is no example. Custance, Arthur Custance, who's sort of the champion of the ruin restoration theory. Finis Dake here is quoting Custis. He says that Custis notes that the earliest Aramaic translation of the Old Testament, the Targum of Onkelos, gives the following interpretation. I assume that's 200, 300 BC. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
earliest Aramaic translation of the Old Testament. He gives the following interpretation of Genesis 1:2, and the earth was laid waste. So he says this rendering clearly indicates that the Jewish scholars compiling one of the first translations of the Scriptures believed something happened between the first two verses of Genesis 1, which resulted in the destruction of the original creation. I've read, but I can't cite it now. Certainly, some of the old rabbis talked in terms of God having several creations, and he was sort of unhappy with a creation until he finally settled on the creation that we currently have. I'm not so much necessarily saying I agree with that, but I think there is example where,
well, look,
even pre New Testament, that there were Jews that believed this.
Custance is taking a liberty here. He's taking a liberty. Anybody can go and look this up, and it's readily available online. It's in Bible software. It says, "And the earth was waste and empty, and darkness was upon the face of the abyss." So he's stretching things. I've looked through his stuff. I've looked at his supposed interpretation of the Hebrew. I'm less than impressed. I respect him as a person. I think he means well, but
well.
I'm sure he meant well. It's nothing to do with his character, of course. Just like I don't have any issues with your character. I think you mean well also. But the issue really comes down to the Hebrew, because if we go back to the other Targumim, which if we look at the Targum of Palestine, or also known as the Targum of Jonathan, it says, "And the earth was vacancy and desolation, solitary of the sons of men, and void of every animal, and darkness is upon the face of the abyss." So it's not saying that God recreated, or that he nixed his first one and now he's starting over. It doesn't say that. So that's the trouble. So these are not going to help. If we even look at the Jerusalem Targum, it says, "And the earth was vacancy and desolation." Now, again, the word that's being supplied here is just as much of a judgment call on the part of the English translator as you have in the Hebrew to English translation. So,
we would agree that it is a judgment.
Well, no,
maybe not a judgment call. That's the position that we take, is that it is a judgment. There was a judgment that had occurred, and that's why the world was in the state that, as we'll talk later about 2 Peter, the world that then was. That is what I believe all of these scholars that believe in the ruin and restoration theory, what they hold to, is that it was a result of satanic rebellion.
Right. We're getting ahead of ourselves.
But I'm just saying that's the context. That's the context.
Yes, I understand that. I appreciate that. Let me just take you down the grammatical road here. This is kind of important.
You guys have 1 minute left.
Okay, I want to show you something in the Hebrew, because 1 minute. Well, it's our debate. Can we just change it?
We have to stick to all of the.
No, we have to
so
stick
many good
to.
Things. I'm afraid the finer points of grammar may be lost on me anyway, Doug.
Well, but they're incredibly important. I mean, take a look here. Take a look. So in the past tense in Hebrew, as I said, you started with a simple past, okay? So that's the word bara. Then we have this parenthetical statement in verse 2. Now the earth was without form and void. And then it's followed by what's called a sequential past tense. So the rest of the chapter is following that model. It's vayikra, vayomer, vayas, vayikra, vayomer. So what that's telling us is that this chapter 1 is one contiguous flow of a story. There's no break. There's a pause to give you some background information about what the earth is, but that's it. It's not telling you that there's millions and billions of years that are somehow stuck in there. That's not at all what's going on in the grammar. The grammar is saying you have a simple past tense, verse 1. You have a parenthetical issue, verse 2, because give me some clarification as to what the earth really means here. And then verse 3 picks up the story. And we find that throughout Hebrew grammar and throughout the Hebrew Bible, that you have a simple past tense, and then you go on with what's called a sequential past tense. And where needed, you'll have a parenthetical statement. And as I've already pointed out, this parenthetical statement is being used many places. This is pointed out by João Maroca. This is the definitive grammar book. And just let you know, Strong's is not. Nobody uses Strong's in the Hebrew community, in the academic community. But he says, on the other hand, a nominal or verbal clause with vav forms a sort of parenthesis and precedes the main clause. So he says, now Abraham was very rich. Now the young girl was very beautiful. Now Nineveh was an enormous city. Now the eyes of Israel were heavy because of old age. And on it goes. And this is using that same phraseology of where you have the word and followed by the subject, that is the noun, and then followed by the verb. Hebrew grammar says, no, the verb should come first, but when you put the noun first or the subject first, you're creating a parenthetical statement. So that cannot be ignored in this discussion. The grammar is everything here. And these other guys, they're Custance, etc. They're not looking at the grammar carefully. They're drawing at straws.
I can't defend Custance too well because he's passed on many years ago. But my sense is certainly he's regarded as an expert in Hebrew grammar. So
by the people that he's regarded as such by the people that like his theory. I mean, that's who thinks that he's an expert.
I could impugn your experts as well, but I didn't study it, prep that to do that. So
the Hebrew experts appreciate these experts. I mean, Gesenius is he's not contested at all. João Maroca, these guys as grammar experts, they're not contested. Right. I mean, everybody who studies biblical Hebrew says, yes, these are the guys. These are the main dudes. So there's no question that these guys are in the know. Again, Custance, intelligent fellow, there's no doubt about that, but I would argue he's missing the main point, and that is you have to look at the grammar. And I don't know if there's any point in going further. I mean, we can, because there's also scientific arguments we can certainly look at. I'm happy to discuss, but you have to go back and look at the grammar. So
I understand your perspective, and the grammar is not unimportant by any means. I would say let's agree that we both, I think, have made some good points, and we should move on. I think most listeners would agree with you that the grammar is important, but it's not the only issue.
It's the central issue. I mean, the grammar. Look, what are we basing our theology on if it's not the grammar?
I think it's based upon the Scripture across the board, and not just the Hebrew grammar that you're referring to in just these verses. Now, I've given you, as I said, 134 examples in the King James where hayach was translated became, and so with some clear examples as to why it is more meaningful to use that term. So Mr. Moderator, I move that we move on.
Well, I decided to be nice and give you guys an extra 5 minutes. But